Welcome, I'm Seth Boustead. I am the lecturer for the Grant Park Music Festival's 2021 season. And the concert I'm about to talk about is actually the final concert of the 2021 season. It will take place on August 20th and August 21st. So you have two chances to see this great music live. The concert will open up with a piece called Elegia Andina by composer Gabriela Lena Frank, and that means Andean elegy, or an elegy to the people who live in the Andes Mountains in Peru, where her mother is from. And the second piece on the program is by Mozart. It's his Violin Concerto number 3. And our soloist for that is Vadim Gluzman. And I was able to talk with him. I'll feature some of our talk a little bit later on in the lecture. And the final piece is, I think it's the most performed, the most popular of Handel's 5 Te Deums, and that is the Dettingen Te Deum. I won't be able to talk too much about that. I'm going to focus instead on the Gabriela Lena Frank piece and on the Mozart. The program opens up with Elegia Andina by Gabriela Lena Frank, and this is a fascinating work for orchestra. There's a lot of different musical influences happening in this piece, but especially music from Peru. Gabriela Lena Frank was born in Berkeley, California, but she speaks often and quite lovingly about having grown up in a multicultural household. Her father was an American of Lithuanian Jewish descent who went into the Peace Corps, was stationed in Peru, and he met her mother. Her mother was Peruvian, but of Chinese descent. And so the composer talks about growing up in this household where they would sing Peruvian folk songs while eating Chinese stir-fry, with visits from Jewish family from New York City. And all of this informs her music in various and sundry ways, but especially the music of Peru. And that's definitely the case in this piece. We're going to hear in the opening part of the work, there's this kind of to me, it's very dramatic opening in the brass, kind of setting the scene. And then the flute comes in, and this is written for Frank Hebert, who is the principal flutist for the Albany Symphony. So she was very much thinking about his technique when she wrote this, but also thinking about imitating the panpipes from Peru. So I'm going to play all of that, and then I'm going to jump about halfway into the piece. I want to play a part that, to me, has influences of Stravinsky. If you know Rite of Spring especially, the rhythmic patterns are very, very similar. They're these really fun offbeats and accentuated patterns, at first pits in the strings and then later bowed. At any rate, it's really a quite fun section. So I'm going to play the opening of this work and then go into that middle section. Here are two parts of Elegia Andina by Gabriela Lena Frank. Music of Gabriela, Lena Frank. We heard a little bit of the opening and then jumped right to the middle. It's a very colorful piece. I wanted to make sure I showcased her mastery of orchestral writing. This is a wonderful way to open up the program. And we're going to go from that piece all the way back in time, a couple hundred years, to Mozart's Third Violin Concerto. We think of Mozart primarily as a keyboardist, but he was quite a good string player as well, mostly viola and violin. So it's pretty fascinating to think that he probably almost certainly could have played these pieces. Our soloist for Mozart 3 is Vadim Gluzman. Hi, Vadim. Thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure. Good morning.
Let's talk about the Mozart Violin Concerto number 3. Is this a piece that you've played before that you know inside and out?
Well, I'm almost 50, you know. I've played a few pieces by now. Mozart 3 has been with me for many, many years, at least for 30, if not more. I think I learned it in very early 90s. And, you know, I think Mozart is one of those composers where describing whom words completely fail. You just look at this music, you look at perfection, and how do you describe perfection? It's absolutely impossible. You can be just grateful to be in its presence.
What can you tell me about the piece itself? I mean, is it a fairly typical structure, or is there anything unusual in the work?
Well, it is a very typical classical concerto. Fast, slow, fast movements. What is for me very interesting is even for Mozart, an unusual abundance of melodies, of thematic material. The first movement is it's almost dizzying how many different themes he uses already in the very opening of the movement. The wealth of lyricism and exuberance, all one to next to another. It's absolutely stunning. It's one of those moments when you are drinking something extraordinarily tasty and it never ends. It's one of those gifts that keeps on giving.
Talk to me about the violin part a little bit. Is this similar to the Beethoven concerto where he's breaking new ground, pushing the violin into new areas, or is it more idiomatic writing for the violin?
I would not call it breaking ground. No, it is as often with Mozart. It is beautifully written. It sits beautifully on the instrument. It is still demanding, but demands are not of a quote unquote virtuoso nature. It's rather artistic demands, where the shape of a line is spinning of the theme is the most important task, I would say. But it has all this incredibly festivus moments that I think are very fitting for, you know, the last concert of Grand Park, as I know we're closing the festival.
That's a little bit of my conversation with Vadim Gluzman, and I want to play a little bit of the first movement now and give you a sense of what he's talking about, this rapid succession of melodies in the Mozart Violin Concerto first movement. The second movement of a concerto is generally a slow movement, and that's certainly the case here in the Mozart Third Violin Concerto. I want to play now, I'm going to skip the opening and just go right to the violin's entrance. This, for my money, is one of the most lyrical slow movements in Mozart. It's an absolutely beautiful melody. That's a little bit of the second movement of Mozart's Violin Concerto Number 3. Gorgeous, gorgeous melody, perfectly structured. Mozart's slow movements are these little gems. I mean, when you get to Beethoven, his slow movements are quite beautiful as well, but you're always marveling at the structure in Beethoven to a certain extent. And with Mozart, as Vadim said, you just sit back and relax and enjoy it and marvel that it even exists. This is a perfect Mozart slow movement. The last movement is a rondo, and in a rondo you're going to hear the theme, and then you're going to hear it again and again, but of course the composer will change it up. So you'll hear the A theme, as we call it, then a B, and then the A theme again, then a C, then the A theme again throughout the work, alternating this material that we know from the beginning with new material. But I want to play the cadenza. This is a concerto after all, and it's really important to play part of the cadenza. This is where the soloist really struts his stuff, shows what he can do. And I asked Vadim Gluzman which cadenza he would be playing for this violin concerto.
Cadenzas is a subject, big subject for all our concertos. We have 5, and we are very envious of pianists, of course, because they have so many more. He never wrote cadenza for us, not for any of the concertos. At the time, it was expected that the soloist will improvise, not just write his or her own, but actually improvise. Sadly, we are we have lost this tradition, and I know it is starting to come back today, with more and more young musicians exploring improvisation, and it even is being taught today at some schools. Unfortunately, I was not exposed to it, and I prefer to play somebody else's cadenzas that I believe are artistically meaningful. And I use, for the first movement, I use cadenza by Robert Levin, a great scholar and pianist and teacher, and I think very special musician. I've had good fortune of meeting him and even working together in Salzburg at the Mozarteum. He wrote a book of cadenzas for all Mozart violin concertos, and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. So I use that.
I didn't know he didn't write any cadenzas for the violin concertos. I had no idea. Thank you.
Not at all. It has been a subject for researchers, and later for every great violinist and pedagogue. They all wrote cadenzas, and we have today books of cadenzas for Mozart concertos published. It's fascinating to see uh, how historically people were addressing cadenzas and what were the expectations and the artistic goals for cadenza. Very interesting.
Nice. Is there anything else about the concerto that you want to say or you think the audience should know?
I think it's interesting to note the relation between the orchestra and the violinist. Uh, I think it's telling of any great work. It doesn't matter when it was written. Truly great works are never one-sided between soloist and orchestra. Orchestra always takes an important role, and of course, maybe when we look at Shostakovich concerto, the writing is much more elaborate and thicker. But it is not a mere accompaniment, and it is the orchestra role and the collaboration is extraordinarily important. So I'm as always, I love playing with the Grand Park Orchestras. I'm very much looking forward.
Fascinating stuff from Vadim Gluzman about cadenzas. I did not know that Mozart didn't write his own cadenzas. Very, very interesting stuff there. Let's hear this now. So we're going to open it up. I'm going to let you hear the theme in the very, very beginning, and then I'm going to jump up to the cadenza, the violin solo, and that'll come back. When the orchestra comes back, you know you're out of the cadenza, you're back into the work itself. We'll hear that opening theme again and hear what Mozart does with it. That's part of the Violin Concerto number 3, third movement by Mozart. And we heard the opening, we heard that theme. Again, this is a rondo, so it's going to alternate between that theme and new material. And then we jumped into the cadenza and heard from Vadim Gluzman about the cadenza that he'll be playing on this concert, and then back into the theme. This concert will close out with the Dettingen Te Deum by Handel, and I don't have time to talk about it too much or play anything from it, but know that this is a kind of unusual work for Handel in many respects. It is an elegy to people who died in the War of the Austrian Succession, and as such, it's a little bit more mournful in some places than you would expect from Handel, but it is a deeply felt, moving, and quite wonderful piece, and a wonderful way to end the program. So again, Gabriela, Lena, Frank, and then Mozart, and then Handel. It's a recipe for success, if you ask me. I'm Seth Boustead. Thanks so much for listening to my talk, and look forward to seeing you next season.